welcome back to Sprague Homestead. I've been getting a lot of messages from people that are trying to get their rabbits breeding. This is kind of the fall season, so a lot of people that took the summer off are now trying to get rabbits bred. And some of you are experiencing some issues, either rabbits not breeding, aggressive behavior, or maybe you're getting fall-offs and you're getting no litters. So we're going to kind of talk our way through some of this. Hopefully some of these things might actually be able to help you, and because nothing's more frustrating than trying to get your rabbits bred and nothing's happening. So I'm going to start by saying the first thing you should be doing every single time you go to breed is you should be doing a full health inspection. We're going to have a video out probably next week. I was going to do it today, but it's a little too windy outside and messes with the camera. But basically you should be doing a full health inspection, making sure that you've got no parasites, and that there's no sign of vent disease or other things that could be causing you a problem in the breeding pen. So we'll have that out next week. But the big thing is you're looking for anything abnormal, and you're basically trying to make sure that that rabbit is ultra healthy. In your does, you're also specifically looking for the color of that vent, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. But if you are at pale pink, which some rabbits are right now because of the molt, she's not going to breed. Even if she lifts, her chance of conception is really low. In a really bad molt, which is what a lot of rabbits are going through throughout the country right now, vitamins and nutrients are kind of sucked up, go into new hair growth, new fur growth, and aren't readily available for a lot of things like conception and breeding. So I've also heard from many breeders, I don't breed my bucks during a molt usually, but I've heard that a bad molt can give fertility rate issues to your bucks as well. So that's something you're going to kind of check out when you're doing your health inspections. And if your boys are really badly molting, give them a couple weeks. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I'm hearing a lot of is people breeding way too early. You got to remember that on most of your large breeds, your New Zealands, your cows, your satins, your silver fox, maturity starts at 9 months. 8 months is early. I know the old standard for commercial rabbits used to be, we breed them at 5 months. Well, there's a lot of science out that says that that's not a good idea. It can shorten their whole lifespan, it's especially the reproductive lifespan. So we don't want to be breeding our rabbits too early. And a lot of times, a new young doe at 5 and 6 months, if she's not mentally and emotionally prepared for that litter, is more likely to screw it up. Nobody wants to come out and find that your rabbit hasn't pulled fur or had babies on the wire. So really let them get to maturity. That needs to be 8-9 months, and they need to be hitting the weight standard for their breed. Now, if you're breeding a crossbreed or a, God forbid, a meat butt, if you've been around, you know I'm not big on the meat butts, but you should have a good idea. Any large breed that's made of cows or New Zealand or anything else, doe should be at least 10 pounds. So if they're not anywhere close to that, I wouldn't be breeding them yet. Now with bucks, a lot of your big bucks are going to be ready at 6 months, even if they're a 9-month-old maturity rate. So it's okay to be using those boys at 6 months. But understand that sometimes we get late bloomers. Some boys aren't ready at 6 months. So what you might find is you take a big doe, and I always try and breed experienced does to new bucks, and experienced bucks to new does kind of thing. Somebody ought to know their way around the coop, so to speak. But if you put a doe in there and he hides in the corner, he's just not ready. Give him another week or two. It does happen. There are some wallflowers in the group a little bit that are a little slow to go. But generally speaking, your boys are going to be ready at 6 months. So that usually takes care of the my rabbit's hiding in the corner thing. Now, sometimes it's an experienced doe that's hiding in the corner, and if you pull her out and look at her again, you might find that she's just not ready. She's just not fleshed out. There's a couple things you can do. You can leave that rabbit in for 15-20 minutes and see if her attitude changes. If not, you can leave her in his cage, put him back in hers, let her sit in there all night with the pheromones and all the things that are hanging out in his cage, and see if that doesn't get her a little bit jazzed up the next day. You might also find that your doe flat out does not like your buck. Now, usually how we know this is happening is she'll actually be aggressive. And that's not just humping them. That's usually her, like, flat out trying to castrate him a lot of times. And I know somebody asked me about that the other day. A couple of things could be happening there. If your doe is trying to castrate your buck, either she's already bred, she's really not interested, and something else is going on. Like, maybe she doesn't feel good, maybe she's got vent disease, maybe something else is going on, or she flat out does not like the buck. Now, this doesn't happen a whole lot, but it does happen. I've had does that you just take them down the line and you find a buck that they're willing to mate with. Some breeds are more finicky than others. I've heard of Satins being a little tough with that. My Triantas are super picky about the boyfriend that they choose. So if one doesn't work, try them with another one. Try them with a third one. If you go through your bucks and it still isn't happening, she's really not ready. And then I would give her a few days and try again. You can try the cage swap thing. There's a bunch of stuff you can do there. But, you know, sometimes, especially in your older does, your 2 and 3 and even into 4, if they've sat all summer without a litter, sometimes they're a little bit slow to want to go in the fall. Another behavior that I'm getting a lot of questions about is does that are put in and that either will let the buck breed once or instantly goes in there and the doe starts humping the buck. This isn't real cause for concern unless she's biting him, then it's kind of a big deal. But usually that's a dominance display, one, so she's showing him I'm in charge, but it also is usually a I'm ready to party kind of thing. So what you'll see sometimes, especially in some of my older does when you're breeding to a younger, more inexperienced buck, she may come in there and instantly start humping him, and then she'll usually stop, run around, assume the position, and lift for him, no problem. Very seldom do you see a doe that will start humping on a buck and then fight him off. That's usually not how it works, but sometimes it does. And if that's the case, again, if you're pretty sure she's ready to breed, keep a close eye on them, 15 to 20 minutes, let them, you know, kind of do their thing, and swap cages if you need to. Maybe she's right there, but she's not convinced all the way that she's ready to breed. So that's something to try. Now, the bigger problem that we see a lot, and I've had it happen to me, you know, you put them in 15 minutes, you get 3 good fall-offs, 30 some odd days later, and you got nothing. That's the frustrating thing. So some does will instantly urinate as soon as you put them back in the pen. This is what I've always found to be my problem when does don't conceive. So what we do with those does that we've had some issues with, they go in, they get 3 fall-offs with the buck, they go back into their pen, and I watch them like hawks for about 15-20 minutes. Usually they're going to either urinate right away or they're not. If they do, back in with the buck for 3 more fall-offs. And sometimes if you don't have the time to keep an eye on them, you might have to come back the next morning or that evening and breed them again. And some does just do it, some of them don't. But that usually has been my problem with conception. Either that or it's a really old doe or a really old buck and you find out that somebody's fertility is no good anymore. The other thing that can be causing a problem is if your doe is fat. With bucks, it's not usually such a big deal. The bigger problem with bucks in the fall is if you've had really hot weather over 85 degrees recently, they could still be heat sterile. They need about 30 days to get that all fleshed out and back to working. So if you find that you're breeding your buck to multiple does and you're getting nothing, he's probably still heat sterile. So give him a couple more weeks and try him again. But with does, oftentimes it's an obesity problem. Remember that rabbits build up fat internally, and that means along the ovaries. So what you might need to do is take your doe, and I like to put them on a grass hay diet until they start losing some weight. In other species, this is also referred to usually as flushing. So you take a really low protein feed like a hay, you feed them for a few weeks, it starts to flush out some of the internal fat, you bump them back up to their full rabbit pellet protein level, usually for 3 to 4 days, and put them back in, and usually that'll get them cycling. Doesn't always work, but it doesn't hurt, especially if your girl is fat. Remember, if there's more internal fat, there's nowhere for babies to go, so you've really got to watch the weight on your rabbits. If it's still not working, there are a couple of really interesting tricks that we rabbit breeders have used for years. Take your rabbits for a car ride. I don't know why this works, but if you've got a double carrier, put your buck in one side, your doe in the other. Take them with you to town. Make sure they're not getting too hot in the car. But for some reason, that seems to work. We also were known for taking rabbits to a show because you've got a lot of pheromones there. That's kind of not possible right now because of COVID has shut down so many different shows. But that usually works. If you've got a row, like we keep most of our bucks in one section, I will sometimes pull a buck out and stick a doe in there for a week or two and basically let her absorb all the funk, which is the boys, for a week or two. And I usually find I don't have any problems with breeding. Now, if you're getting small litters and a lot of small litters and your rabbits aren't older, usually that's going to be a nutrient issue. And a lot of times it's vitamin B. This is where we get into that whole thing about where I tell you not to be mixing stuff in if you're not sure what you're doing. So if you've been feeding a whole lot of greens, you've probably unbalanced their vitamins. So you might want to just stop everything that you've got going on other than some rabbit feed for a few weeks. Let them get their nutrients caught back up and then try it again, because probably what's happening is low vitamin B will make for small litter sizes and low sex drive, for a lack of a better thing to call it. So that's pretty much the tips and tricks to try and get them back to breeding. Most rabbits don't have any problems, but when you do run into something, I've got somebody in breeding right now. When you do run into stuff that's an issue, a lot of times it comes down to not being ready, a molt, or obesity. So if you've got questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. I'll be happy to get back to you. Sounds like I've got a doe to get out of there. And that is it for Sprague Homestead. We will see you next time. Happy homesteading.